Hello everyone, welcome to Chief Chat with our Fire Chief, Chief Dave Brogan, and our Police Chief Lee Gavin. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
We've got a lot to talk about today. There was a drug bust not too long ago on Beach and Annapolis, you said, and that was a pretty intense situation over there. Can you tell us about it?
Yes, for our officers. So what happened that day earlier this week? Officers made an arrest in that area for a subject on his bicycle. He was dealing drugs. And when the officers were searching him, the one officer doing the search had on a lighter pair of cotton-type gloves. And some of the heroin penetrated through his glove, got into his system. And after they made the arrest and they were back en route to the station, he didn't feel right, and he thought he was going to pass out. So they hurried back to the station, lights and sirens, and when they got back to the station, then the other officer started feeling ill himself. So
you had two officers
that were involved in the arrest.
That were physically affected.
Physically affected. It was a heroin arrest. So when they got back to the police station, on the way back, the one officer was trained in administering Narcan, and he had a box himself, so he administered it. It's a nasal spray. Mm-hmm. And then we called the fire department, and then Chief Dave and boys came over to the fire station and tended to the two officers. And they were feeling a little better by then, but we had them transported to Garden City Hospital, and then they were put under observation for a few hours and then released. But probably the moral of the story is, if it can happen to officers out there, it can happen to anybody.
And this is just being absorbed from the skin through gloves.
Through a glove, through a cotton glove.
So I can imagine if someone purposely actually took the stuff. I mean, that's sort of a suicide note waiting to happen.
And then we haven't completed all the tests yet. We believe it was heroin, but there's so much fentanyl out there, which is so much more powerful than heroin. So all it does is take a speck of that to get into your system, and it destroy you, it can kill you. So it's just so important, if you see any drugs laying around, if any members of your household use them and they leave them around, or in a hotel or in public, just make sure you don't touch it. You know, you see more and more stories with officers and firefighters getting injured, getting it into their system, overdosing themselves as a result of this. So here in Dearborn Heights, we just we bought a product. It's a test kit, and it costs us about $25,000. So now what you can do is you can hold it up to, let's say you got some heroin, a packet of heroin. You can test it without taking the heroin or the drug out of its container and putting it in test kits. Now, this device can test through a plastic bag and get you, what the contents of the bag are and the purity, this and that. So that saves the officer from taking the items out, the drugs out, and testing them themselves, which we're always fearful of that.
Absolutely. So you think it's heroin, because I know we were talking earlier and we said it was, I'm going to try to pronounce this, carfentanil. Carfentanil.
Yeah.
So
carfentanil is always the one that we're really concerned about now. Fentanyl came out, and that can absorb through the skin, and that is way more powerful than heroin. And cocaine. And so we were having people that were overdosing through touching fentanyl. Then carfentanil came along, and that's again like 50 times more powerful than fentanyl. And so they keep coming out with these more, and that's people refer to that one as the elephant tranquilizer. It literally is an elephant tranquilizer. Why they've decided to push that into these recreational drugs, I have no idea. But they're mixing these together. And again, these aren't chemists. They're the people that cook these things together. They don't always get it exactly right. Yeah, and they've had people that have done the cooking have died from using this to try to make it. And also, if they don't make it quite right and a bad batch gets into the area, we know it immediately because our overdoses just skyrocket. We'll instead of getting, we might get 1 or 2 a week now, and we'll be getting 3 to 5 a day when a bad batch gets in the area. And so we know right away when it happens. And it's just the opioid crisis is, it's got a lot more attention recently, and Narcan is getting much more readily, I mean, people know a lot more about Narcan than they ever did.
Sure.
We've had it on our drug boxes and our squads for years and years and years, and now all of a sudden everyone knows what it is, and there are places where you can get a prescription for it and get it over the counter and have it at your house. We were talking about some accidental overdoses. We had a 2-year-old overdose who got into their parents' heroin. And so that's the kind of things that we're dealing with, and we're seeing these kinds of problems over and over and over. And again, someone who's addicted to heroin isn't a horrible person, and that's kind of they're resistant to go get help. And how do they end up addicted to heroin? And it's such an easy road to go down, where it starts off typically with Vicodin or a painkiller that you've been prescribed. You take the painkiller, and then that slowly you build up an addiction to it. And actually, not even all that slowly. Some people get addicted relatively quickly to it. And
well, they say if you take those kinds of medications for 3 days, you can easily become addicted.
Right. And some people are certainly more susceptible to it than others. And so
it's a remarkable statistic.
Right.
Chief Dave, maybe you can talk about Narcan, how now that it's available and a lot of our drug users know it's out there, they try to get a more intense high knowing that the fire department's going to respond and probably save their life. So,
right, and so we've heard of that too, where people have lost some of the fear of taking it because, well, if they overdose, someone will call and I'll be okay. They could save me. We have the same people we've saved over and over and over. And I mean, certainly no one's doing it intentionally, but knowing that there's this kind of a safety net out there. But the problem is, if there's a bad batch in the area, we've had cases where we've had more than one overdose at a time, where you get there and there are multiple people unconscious at the same time, so no one's there to call 911 because they've all shot up, or they've all and people have died.
That was going to be my comment. What about there's nobody there?
That's exactly what happens. And if for whatever reason, usually we have a very fast response time, but if we're tied up or there's who knows what kind of delay there could be, you could start, when we get there, they're not breathing. Yeah, and when you're not breathing, you're not getting any oxygen, and if you go 5 or 6 minutes without oxygen, you can have brain damage. So, it's a crisis that we're dealing with, and hopefully, it starts with the doctors. And
I know this may be a crazy question, but something that just came into my mind. Isn't there a way to create some consequences if you are called more than 2 times to a particular place to say,
yeah, well,
somehow,
double bill them or something.
Yeah, say you will be triple billed the next time this is, because
Chief
now,
Gavin and I,
now it's done on purpose.
Yeah. Well, Chief Gavin and I work with the organization called ASAP, part of Access, and that's really where it has to start. Is these people they're really sick. They need help, and trying to find a way to reach them, and trying to find people who've had this this addiction, and then they've recovered and gotten better and found it is a better life when you're not addicted to something like that. And quite frankly, it's expensive. That's usually why they get off of if they're taking Vicodin, for example, they'll be taking 14, 15, 16 pills a day, and then they find out heroin is much cheaper. They only need a tiny little bit of it, and they only need to get 1 instead of this kind, and then it keeps escalating from there.
Up.
And they don't necessarily have to shoot up anymore. They can snort it, and there's different ways to take the heroin, where before, it's quite a leap to go to where you're actually, an IV drug user. Yeah, and that's the step 1 is getting a prescribed or taking someone else's prescription, something that seems relatively harmless, a pill, and then it just escalates to this addiction that we're seeing.
And when they're paying $20, $25 a pill, and they're using numerous throughout the day, that's why they resort to heroin. It's cheaper. I was talking to a young man that was arrested a few weeks ago, and I asked him, I said, what's going on here? Why are you doing this? And he said, I'll be honest. He said, doctor gave me a withdrawal type drug. He said, I've been on that, but it was too expensive. He says, so I start buying heroin. He said, I've been on it a week. He said, I got 4 kids at home. I said, do you know what that's going to eventually do? He said, I know it's probably going to kill me. He says, I just can't get into a rehab center right now. He says, they're so full, and you've almost got to be suicidal or some type of emergency situation to get in. And me and Chief Dave deal with that with our ASAP group through Access. How many people need help, but there's not beds in room available for them unless it's an emergency situation. So that's a problem. I think all of us have been touched by the drug epidemic. If it's not our family, friends, someone that we know in the neighborhood, you see someone's addicted and then they pass away. So it's affected all of America, and our first responders deal with it on a daily basis. You know, along with our hospitals, and I mean, how many times in the ER they're given Narcan a day? So it's just, we could do a whole show just on drugs and narcotics.
Absolutely.
And it's everywhere. It's in our community, it's in Detroit, it's in Birmingham, Bloomfield, it is everywhere.
And even, you know, when you do those runs, you know, more on multiple occasions, you know, the factor of you need to get help, and, you know, we need to see that you're doing this and make sure. I mean, and you're saying that there isn't the capacity to help, so it's definitely an ongoing crisis, and hopefully we can get that addressed really quick. Staying on that topic, we were talking earlier, which really broke my heart, in regards to police dogs.
Right.
So when they sniff as well, I mean, that gets into, so
it's
what
the same thing. They can absorb it through the skin of their nose, and obviously they're using their nose to detect the drug, and so that's something that they're now teaching to all the canine officers to be aware of that. If you do a Google search, you can find lots of cases where dogs have been affected by this. I know our dog talked with a handler, and we were sure that he got some Narcan, so he can administer it to his dog, just in case something like that happens.
And then too, if it is on the floor, a dog walks over it with its pads, and it can absorb through the paws of the dog in that. So it just.
What kind of symptom does the dog show, if for you to know that?
You can tell they get really lethargic. A lot of times they'll just want to lay down. These are the different. It's a lot of the same with people. What happens with people is they'll go unconscious, and then it affects your drive to breathe. You stop breathing. So everything's working except you're not breathing, and you're unconscious. And so you certainly look very dead. You still have a pulse, but your pulse is only going to go so long without any oxygen. And so when we get there, you know, it depends on how long they've been, because the heart will eventually stop if there's not enough oxygen, and then we go from there. It'll be the same with a dog.
Again, even on the same topic, there was a man that was found dead in his car in back of the Taco Bell, and that was drug related too, Chief, right?
In our South End last week, two men went in to purchase drugs, and they were driving back home, and the passenger in the car wasn't feeling good, and he started grunting and moaning, and his friend knew he was probably going to overdose, and a good friend he was, just pulled the car behind Taco Bell in the South End and got out, took the man's wallet, and
he did a little
left him there. Man passed away. 3 days later, they found him after one of the employees was out cleaning the lot and noticed a very strong smell coming from the car, and so we went there and found the gentleman deceased. So that's another statistic there in the drug world. But then again, what's it say for a friendship? Here, his friend leaves him there, doesn't get him help. I mean, is that a true friend? Is that what you want your friends to do? So it just shows.
Friends wouldn't be giving you drugs to begin with.
It just shows out there, these guys that are friends in the drug world, they're not really friends.
No.
So what it comes down to is your family and your close friends. That's what you got. Some of these people you think are friends, no. So you need your family, you need your close associates, and that's what you need to get by.
Absolutely. And you need to determine who are friends and who are just using you and benefiting from who you are, unfortunately. And they could have really just dropped him off at some hospital, Garden City.
The fire station
across the street from the fire station.
They could have
rung
drove
the
into
doorbell and run away.
Fire lot, ran away and hit the doorbell of the fire station.
Or even call 911 and said,
Right,
my friend's sick, he's in the car, and then drove off.
Behind
Anything.
Taco Bell.
Right.
I mean, even if they wanted to do that. So obviously, well, they're into drugs, so I guess the common sense factor is not too prevalent. Chief, on a more positive note, you have been accepted for the SAFER grant, which is really exciting. So you're able to hire some more firemen. So tell us about that, and how do you administer the grant, and how is it great for Dearborn Heights?
Well, we were very, very excited when we got the call. So we just found out that we were awarded a SAFER grant for 3 firefighters, and so we'll be able to hire 3 new firefighters to as an addition to our force. And what our intention is to have 3 firefighters, and then we're going to create this battalion chief position, is something that our department has really been needing. And so we'll have a 3-year time to experiment with this and make sure this is going to work as well as we all anticipate it to work, and make sure the cost isn't going to be, we have a good idea. It shouldn't be that expensive if we restructure our department in the way that we have planned out. There's some negotiations that has to be done with the union, but they're all very much on board with this concept as well. A battalion chief, people wonder, well, I'm a chief, he's a chief, you have a deputy chief, and what now a battalion chief? Well, you can't get hung up on the titles. A battalion chief is still a firefighter in the suppression, so they're still on the trucks and still working the 24-hour shifts.
But they have more control as to how things are going to be applied. Is that
correct? Yep. And so their job is to run that shift. We have 3 shifts: A, B, and C. And so obviously one of those shifts on duty every day, and then the battalion chief will be there overseeing the entire shift. So we don't have any one person in charge of the whole of all the guys that are on duty. Obviously, I'm in charge of everything that happens.
Yeah, the buck stops
right,
there.
Right. But I'm not there 24 hours a day.
Right.
And so you have this person who's in charge of doing all the paperwork. There's a lot of administrative things that are going to be handled through this position that currently the captain at the headquarters station is in charge of doing. However, sometimes the lieutenant is doing that job. The position often changes depending on who happens to be on duty.
There on
yeah,
duty.
And so the shifts can run differently from station to station because you have a different captain, a different officer at each one, and whoever arrives to the fire first, that's who's in charge and who runs the fire. And so you could have a fire in the afternoon and this person's in charge and they run it this way. You have a fire in the evening and now the other person's going to be in charge. And it mostly runs the same way, but there are some differences.
Sure, and that can be confusing too,
it can
I
be
think,
for the firefighters.
people coming in.
And so when you have a battalion chief, they're in charge of every single fire. And not only that, they're responding in their own vehicle. It's not going to be a fire truck. The fire truck is really a work truck. So a glorified work truck. When you get off everything in there is built towards tools for fighting fires, not necessarily for managing a large incident with 20 people or more, depending on the size of the incident. Where a command vehicle, like we will have for the battalion chief, they will respond and they will have all these tools at their disposal.
That they have to
right.
that will be used.
Yeah, there's a protocol. There's some practical hands-on tools that you can use to manage a large scene like that. You could have a computer set up for this. You could have command boards with all the different people on duty. There are programs that help manage a large scene. You can get a floor plan of, if it's a commercial building, a lot of times we'll have a pre-fire plan, and you can Google Earth, all these things that a guy on the fire truck doesn't have those tools, where you're going to have all this set up and they're going to be able to run the scene. They'll be looking at the scene from a controlled environment. They can hear all the radio traffic better when you're in this controlled environment. We've had cases where people have called for a mayday and a fire scene can be very loud. There's a lot of things happening and it's not easy to pick up every radio transmission that's going on. Where you have a battalion chief, they're in a controlled environment, they're listening to what's going on because that's their only job, is to run this scene to make sure every radio transmission is heard and everything's being handled properly and safely. Not that long ago we had 10 people at a fire. Sometimes only 8 people show up at a fire.
So basically there's a plan. And will these individuals be trained to do this, or is this something that's already canned? And
well, we have already, our captains right now still will run a fire scene, and they're very good at it. We've done it this way. I mean, I did it myself for years and years, without doing it from
but
this different vantage point. Is going to make it much safer. Like there'll be a point where we look back and say, why did we ever run fires that way when we should have been doing it this way? I believe that's where we will get to. For right now,
it's always good to get better and better.
Right. It's just an improvement, and literally every fire department around us has that and runs that way, except for 2 departments that only have 1 station each. So if you only have 1 station, you don't really need a battalion chief,
right,
because everything's happening at that 1 station. As far as the communication, the administration back and forth. When you only have 10 people at a fire, that's easy to keep track of. But now we're getting 20 people to a fire with the way we're using mutual aid, which is the NFPA recommended number. Well, you better have the tools in place to manage that many people. If you lose track of people or you're not using them effectively, then you might as well not have them there.
Right, absolutely.
So, yeah.
Well, that sounds like
very,
a great,
very exciting.
Great
yeah, it's $340,000, and again, Lieutenant Lisa Martin, she does an outstanding job writing grants for us. It's I think between $5 and $6 million she's brought in from writing grants.
Well, there's a good
amazing.
plug, yes.
Yes.
To talk to her.
No matter who gets any of those positions that Chief is talking about, I compliment the fire department all the time. I'm sure a lot of our residents have had contact with our firefighters, but bunch of great guys.
Absolutely.
Very professional. I had an incident. I woke up the other night, lights flashing in my window. I'm wondering if my house is on fire or what, but the rescue was next door.
Were you just trying to pull a stunt on him that night?
Waking me up.
We were scared.
And, I didn't see anybody around, so I had to call dispatch, find out what's going on, nosy neighbor. But my elderly neighbor fell, and they spent about 20 minutes helping her get to the door so she could unlock it with her cane. But they're very patient. They come out. That's 2 o'clock in the morning. So we do have a very good fire department. I compliment you.
Absolutely. Dearborn Heights is a great place to be and to be safe. So you have a lot of great news too within the police department. You've actually hired 4 new police officers. So tell us about them. And how we were able to hire 4 new police officers.
Like a revolving door.
Great.
We've hired 4.
So they're not additional. It's sort of okay.
And we're probably about 8 short. So we're trying to, right now the academy's in session. They'll graduate in November, so we should be able to get a new bunch of recruits there. But hired some young officers. We've been bringing some in from Detroit, young guys that want to get out of Detroit, get in the suburbs. We brought on couple officers that had much experience from the Wayne County Sheriff's Department. Brought in 2 officers.
Mehdi Bazzi from the Wayne County Sheriff's Department. Ty Jasmine.
Ty Jasmine was a recruit from the academy.
Michael Walters.
Michael Walters was a Detroit officer. And then...
Mehdi Ayub, a 3-year veteran.
So Mr. Ayub and Bazzi are buddies, went to the academy together, and we both hired them. So, yep. We're moving along. We've put it out there before. If anyone's interested, all these seems like a lot of communities in the police and fire sector are hiring. So if you have any interest, contact someone at Schoolcraft Academy, or each county has an academy, and inquire what it takes to be a police officer.
Good. So the fire department and police department are taking
we're hiring
applications.
As well, yes.
There you go, everybody. Applications. So back to school. Yay! Hooray! I know that's always challenging in terms of the buses, the routes, and simple courtesy of the drivers dropping off and picking up and everything else. So what have you seen in terms of what we're looking at right now?
Been in session 2 weeks, and again, a lot of our schools are in residential areas, or let's say Crestwood, Riverside, on main streets. And the parking lots are very small, so you get a lot of backup onto the main streets. We try to stress to the parents, if you're going to Riverside, go over to the Warren Valley, pick up your kids over there. Crestwood, they back up on Beach Daily. And we brought it up before. They back up and they block the fire station. We've had a few times when a rescue comes out and they're blowing their siren and people don't want to move because they get out of their, get forced out of their spot. We have the whole big Canfield drive there. Pull in the Canfield Center. Your kids are young, they're healthy, most of them can walk over to the center. Then we don't block Beach Daily. Last year we had a few kids trying to cross between the cars and then they get hit. So if we keep the traffic off the main streets and in the parking lots, things will go a little better.
And also that being cognizant not to block that driveway of the fire department. So just stop if there's someone, in front. So
or if you're in a residential area, we'll use Highview School. People block the homeowners' driveways or pull in their driveways. You know what? If the homeowner wants to back out, move your car, let them out. Just try to be courteous. That's the big thing, Siam, you said, is it's busy, it's congested. Star Academy, getting a lot of complaints there. But then again, there's like 700 cars that come there a day. So we try to keep the flow of traffic. But yeah, people are in a hurry. People get short-tempered. But just try to be patient, and we'll get through it.
Absolutely, and I think patience is a virtue, and that's the word. And you have to be courteous to the other people around you, because when you're trying to get your way through, it's going to take maybe 30 seconds of your time,
right.
And you're going to be 30 seconds late. So that's really important. So let's be kind and courteous out there, especially driving. And you're driving your most precious commodity, so we want to make sure that everyone's safe.
Everyone's safe.
Fires being started, burning leaves, and all kinds of other stuff, but burning
Yep.
leaves
so
first.
come fall, I want to remind everyone that you're not allowed to burn leaves, any debris. You're not allowed to burn garbage.
So you're not even allowed to burn them in your fire pit or anything like that, or
nope.
in a
The
big
only
tin
thing you can
garbage
burn.
can.
No, that's not allowed either.
Just want to make sure.
No, you have to bag all that stuff up and take it out for compost. Any kind of fire at all like that can cause a lot of smoke. It can be a nuisance to the neighbors. The only thing you're allowed to burn for a recreational fire is seasoned dried hardwood, firewood.
In your fire pit.
In your fire pit.
Nowhere else.
And nowhere else. and you're supposed to be 15 feet of a structure, 15 feet of a lot line, have some means of extinguishment, a garden hose or something nearby. It always be attended. So it is possible to have a fire, but you have to do it the right way. And certainly you can't have a fire to get rid of any lawn debris or anything like that. So.
Now that it's getting cooler, do we have any problems with indoor barbecues?
So there are times that we do. And another barbecue
Because people want their barbecue.
They do. And even inside of, I've seen people, well, I'm inside my garage. You don't want to barbecue inside your garage either. So barbecues are for outside. If you want to do it in the rain, you can do it outside in the rain, but never, ever inside. Inside you can have carbon monoxide. We've had a few incidents of carbon monoxide where people had a bunch of coals burning inside. They're trying to generate heat in their house, and there were 5 people that got poisoned from carbon monoxide. They all survived, but these things happen every year, and every year we give the same warning. So please, none of that. Make sure you have carbon monoxide detectors, because furnaces are turning back on again. A bird, your furnace might have worked good last year. Maybe a bird blocked up your exhaust. And now your furnace might fire up and you get carbon monoxide in your house.
That's
so be
scary.
sure, you have a carbon monoxide detector. This is a good time of year to check it. Of course, the battery, when the clocks change again, is when you're supposed to be changing all your batteries. So.
And a real quick update. Last time we had bluebell here.
Oh yes.
So tell us about bluebell. I mean, you're familiar with bluebell, of
Bluebell,
course,
yep.
right? That's the pet of choice.
So good old bluebell. She's still, there was a lot of concern with her leg, because her leg
Right,
is
she was
malformed.
supposed to have surgery last
she was
time.
supposed to have surgery, and so that's why we were fostering her for the Humane Society in the first place, because she couldn't be in with the regular dogs. Not regular dogs, she's a regular dog. She couldn't be in, she had some special needs. And she
With the
needed
mediocre dogs.
Yeah,
She's
she is a special dog, that's right, that's right. And she was still a pretty young pup, and so she really bonded with all of us. She loved life at the fire station, and it was just a great fit. Now, she was with us for so long, obviously the guys got really attached to her, and there were several guys that wanted to adopt her, and we did select Lieutenant Adam Kowalski, who's a member of our critical incident stress team. So when any firefighter in the area there's a lot of traumatic calls we deal with now, and I mean, we always have, but now we're much more mindful of the PTSD and the long-term effects of things like that. So we have this team that will go out, come to Dearborn Heights or to any of the surrounding fire departments or police departments and do a quick diffusing with them after a bad incident. So now Bluebell is going to be a part of that team along with Lieutenant Kowalski.
That's
Yeah,
well,
so.
animals are always, pleasant, especially when you're in distress.
Yep.
They have
Yes.
that calming effect. Are you affiliated with Bluebell? I mean, do you bring her on to the force?
Not too
or
much. When I
she's-
used to go by the firehouse there, Bluebell was around, always friendly. But we have our big dog, our canine, and Bluebell's just a little fire dog.
So what's
that
the
runs
name of
around
the
park.
canine? You can't
Bane.
just call him canine. Okay,
Bane
Bing.
is
So
our
Bing
canine.
and Bluebell are protecting Dearborn Heights. I like
right.
that
That's
very
right.
much. Do you have
Real quick, I just
yes.
want to say, keep our audience in suspense here, waiting. My retirement is coming here down the road shortly, so what I'm going to do is, in one of the next upcoming meetings, I'm going to bring in the new police chief that is going to take over for me. So we'll introduce him to our audience out there. But I've been with City 38 years, and it's winding down real quickly. And in November, we'll have a new chief. So.
Well, you will always be part of us, and you will always be part of Chief Chat. So we're going to count
right.
on you for
Thank you.
being with us
Absolutely.
continuously. And we wish you the best on your retirement, but it's not over yet.
Nope,
You're still
I'm
going to be
here.
part of
And
it.
I just thank you for always being so gracious and
Well,
professional with us.
Thank you for being here, and thank
Thank
you
you.
for your service and your continued service, especially on
I'll
Chief
be around.
Chat.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief,
Okay.
and thank you both for the information and always being helpful and giving our audience wonderful pointers on how to be safe. And no barbecues indoors, please, guys. Winter is coming, and it's very, very tempting, but not a good idea. Have a good day, stay safe, and thanks for watching us on Chief Chat.